There is a story that has not been fully told, a story that stretches across oceans through centuries of pain and triumph, through the cries and songs of people who refuse to be forgotten. It is the story of Africa's lost sons and daughters, those who were taken, scattered, renamed, and rewritten by history. Yet no matter how far they were carried by the winds of displacement, something deep within them never died. The spirit of home, of Africa, remained. This is not just a story of loss, but of survival, of rebirth, and of rediscovery. It's the unwritten story of the diaspora, a story still unfolding with every heartbeat of those who remember where they come from, even if the world tried to make them forget. When we look back, we see not just ships crossing the Atlantic, but souls being uprooted from sacred soil, men, women, and children whose dreams were chained but whose essence could not be captured. These were not nameless people. They were descendants of kings, architects, healers, warriors, and teachers. They carried within them the memory of civilizations that built pyramids, studied the stars, and birthed philosophies long before Europe found its light. What was stolen from Africa was not just labor, it was knowledge, rhythm, spirit, and creativity. Yet even when torn away, that essence continued to live in the songs of the Caribbean, in the dance of Brazil, in the rhythm of the American South, and in the spirit of every black person who stood tall against oppression. Africa was never truly lost. She was simply scattered across the world. Generations grew up in lands where their roots were severed, where they were taught to hate their reflection, to forget their name, and to silence their heritage. The world told them they were less human, less capable, less beautiful. But deep down, the fire of origin never went out. Across centuries, that flame burned quietly, waiting for the right moment to rise again. It lived in the spiritual sung in the cotton fields, in the coded messages of songs that spoke of freedom. It lived in the drums that continued to beat even when forbidden, in the hairstyles that carried the memory of home, and in the languages that refused to die. You see, Africa's children never stopped speaking her name, even when they no longer knew it. They carried it in their soul. Every generation in the diaspora has fought a battle between identity and survival. They were told to assimilate, to forget, to erase themselves for acceptance. But truth has a way of resurfacing. No matter how deep you bury the roots, the tree will find a way to grow again. The descendants of Africa have reached a turning point in history, a time when knowledge travels faster than oppression, when stories once silenced are now being reclaimed. DNA tests are connecting people to tribes they never knew existed. Ancestral lands are opening their arms to those who wish return. Languages once forbidden are being learned again. Africa is calling, and her children are beginning to answer. This awakening is not just about geography. It's about remembering who you are. The diaspora has shown that African identity is not confined to one place. It lives in Harlem and Havana, in Kingston and London, in Lagos and Johannesburg. It thrives wherever African descendants walk in dignity. To be part of the African family is not just to share a bloodline, but to share a spirit, one of resilience, creativity, and endurance. The pain of separation has birthed a wisdom that unites. The struggle has forged a strength the world cannot deny. Africa's lost sons and daughters were never truly lost. They were seeds planted across the world, and now those seeds are beginning to bloom. To understand this journey, we must look beyond suffering and see the power hidden within it. The diaspora did not just survive, it transformed. Through the ages, it created art, music, and literature that changed the world. It produced leaders who challenged injustice, thinkers who reshaped the course of nations, and dreamers who turned oppression into revolution. The world tried to erase Africa's legacy, yet it was through her descendants that humanity learned courage, rhythm, and endurance. From the jazz clubs of New Orleans to the reggae beats of Jamaica, from the poetry of Harlem to the struggles of Soweto, Africa's voice echoed in every note, every word, every heartbeat. But the story is not just about what was lost or created, it's about what's being reclaimed. There is a movement growing, not of revenge but of restoration. Young people across the diaspora are tracing their lineage, wearing their heritage proudly, and reconnecting with the continent. They are learning that Africa was not a place of darkness but of divine light, knowledge, and creativity. They are realizing that to know where you come from is to understand your purpose. The world taught them to search for value outside themselves, but the truth is their value was written in their DNA long before history tried to erase it. The unity of the diaspora and the continent represents more than just cultural pride. It's the key to the future. Imagine the brilliance of African descendants across the world uniting their minds, their wealth, and their creativity to rebuild the very lands their ancestors were stolen from. Imagine the return of not just bodies but of ideas, technologies, and dreams. That is the real power of return, not to look back in pain, but to move forward in strength. Africa does not need pity. She needs partnership with her children, wherever they are. And the diaspora is beginning to understand that returning home is not just a physical journey, it is a spiritual restoration of identity, pride, and belonging. For too long, Africa has been described through the lens of poverty and conflict, while her sons and daughters have been portrayed as survivors of struggle rather than heirs of greatness. But the truth is emerging. Africa was the beginning of civilization, the origin of wisdom, and the foundation of human progress. Those who were taken carried that legacy with them, and now it is returning full circle. The diaspora is realizing that they are not just a part of history, they are the continuation of, they are the living proof that no amount of displacement can erase destiny. This awakening is reshaping the world. The same energy that built pyramids, invented mathematics, and taught the world about harmony with nature is rising again in modern form, through technology, art, and community. The diaspora is no longer asking for recognition, it is claiming its rightful place. It is remembering that blackness was never a curse, it was creation's finest masterpiece. The melanin, the rhythm, the vision, all of it speaks of divine design and enduring beauty. Africa's lost sons and daughters are finding their way home, not because someone gave them permission, but because history has called them back. And so the unwritten story continues. Every African descendant who stands tall, speaks truth, and loves their identity adds another page to this grand book of rebirth. The winds that once carried ships of sorrow now carry whispers of pride and remembrance. What was once scattered is gathering again. What was once silenced is now being sung with clarity and strength. The diaspora was not lost. It was planted, and now it is growing into something the world has never seen before. A united, conscious, and unstoppable people who know their worth, who honor their ancestors, and who are ready to shape the future. Africa is not just a continent, it is a heartbeat, ancient, eternal, and unbroken. And every son and daughter of the diaspora is a note in that rhythm, a reflection of that original light. The world may have tried to rewrite this story, but it cannot end what was never truly finished. The time of remembering has come, and with it the rise of a people who have found their way home, not just to Africa, but to themselves. You were never lost, only scattered. The story of Africa's sons and daughters was never one of disappearance, but of dispersal. History tried to label it as loss, as tragedy, as an ending. But in truth, it was the beginning of something greater than anyone could have imagined. When the children of Africa were taken, torn from their lands, and cast across the seas, the world believed it was witnessing the breaking of a people. But what it was really witnessing was the spreading of a seed, a divine scattering of brilliance, resilience, and power that would later grow in every corner of the earth. What looked like separation was preparation. What looked like suffering was the foundation of an awakening that could not be contained by borders or chains. From the first ships that left the coasts of West Africa to the plantations of the Americas, from the islands of the Caribbean to the streets of Europe, Africa's sons and daughters carried with them something the world could not steal, their spirit. They carried the rhythm of the drum, the strength of the ancestors, and the fire of creation itself. Even when they were stripped of language, names, and homeland, something inside refused to die. Their laughter carried the tone of survival. Their songs were filled with codes of freedom. Their dances told stories of kingdoms long gone but not forgotten. They were not merely survivors, they were bearers of memory. Every place where the African diaspora set foot became touched by their light. Their music, their art, their energy reshaped the cultures around them. Jazz, blues, reggae, samba, hip-hop, all born from the rhythm that once echoed through the heart of Africa. They brought life to lands that had never known such beauty of soul. They taught the world what endurance looks like, what resilience feels like, and what it means to rise even when buried under the weight of injustice. To say Africa lost her children is wrong, because through her scattered ones, she reached the entire world. For generations, they were told they had no past worth remembering. The world gave them false names, rewritten histories, and distorted images of their worth. But identity cannot be erased when it's woven into your very being. The melanin in their skin, the rhythm in their walk, the passion in their voice, all spoke of a lineage that no colonizer could ever redefine. Though their tongues forgot the old languages, their souls remembered. Though their feet walked foreign lands, their hearts kept time with Africa's heartbeat. Each generation that rose was another echo of home, calling out across time and distance saying, "We are still here." You were never lost, only scattered. Like stars across the night sky, you were placed in different lands so that your light could be seen from everywhere. Every time a black person succeeds against impossible odds, Africa shines. Every time one stands proud in their identity, another piece of the scattered whole returns to its place. The world thought it could divide a people and weaken them, but in scattering you, it unknowingly made you global. Now Africa speaks every language, walks every street, and holds influence in every corner of the earth. The time of confusion is ending. The time of remembering is here. Across the diaspora, a movement is awakening. People tracing their roots, reclaiming their languages, wearing their heritage and embracing their identity. They are realizing that their separation was never meant to break them, but to build a bridge back to where it all began. The world once used chains to bind you. Now you are using knowledge to free yourselves. The same technology that once disconnected you is now reconnecting you. You are rediscovering the truth that was buried beneath centuries of lies, that you are not the descendants of slaves, but of kings, inventors, builders, and visionaries. The scattering was not a curse, it was a calling. Because of it, Africa's spirit reached places it had never been before. Its music touched the hearts of the oppressed. Its culture transformed the world's rhythm, and its people inspired generations. You were scattered so that humanity could see what endurance looks like. You were dispersed so that no one could ever again deny Africa's influence. The blood that flows through your veins carries the memory of pyramids, empires, and sacred lands. It carries the creativity that built cities, the wisdom that guided civilizations, and the unbreakable faith that endured every storm. Every challenge faced by the diaspora, from slavery to segregation, from discrimination to displacement, was another test of strength. Yet every generation stood up, refused to break, and passed the torch forward. From the activists who marched, to the artists who sang truth into existence, to the thinkers who challenged systems, they all carried Africa with them. Each victory, no matter how small, was a step closer to reconnection. Each struggle, no matter how painful, was a reminder that greatness cannot be erased. And now the scattered ones are returning, not always in body but in mind, in spirit, and in purpose. Africa is no longer a distant memory, it is a living pulse calling her children home. Whether through travel, culture, or consciousness, the diaspora is rediscovering that Africa is not something to romanticize, it is something to rebuild. The scattered seeds have grown into trees of wisdom, and those trees are beginning to lean toward one another, forming a forest of unity. The time has come not only to remember where you came from, but to honor why you were sent out. You were scattered to spread greatness. You were scattered so that when you rise together again, the entire world will know your story. This is not the end of Africa's journey. It is the continuation of it through you. The winds that once carried ships of sorrow now carry messages of pride and awakening. The world that once silenced your ancestors now watches as their descendants reclaim their power. You were never lost. You were multiplied, so stand tall wherever you are. Know that you are not alone, not forgotten, and not broken. You are part of a vast, unending story that began long before history was written. The scattering was not your downfall, it was your mission. You were sent to remind the world of its beginning, that all life, all wisdom, and all strength trace back to the cradle of Africa. You are the living continuation of that truth, the embodiment of a legacy too great to be contained by time or distance. You were never lost, only scattered. And now as the world begins to wake, as Africa calls her children home, and as the diaspora answers that call with pride and unity, the truth shines brighter than ever before. The scattered have found their direction, the forgotten have remembered, the lost have returned, not as victims but as victors. And through them the world will finally see that Africa was never gone. She was always everywhere, waiting for her children to realize that they carried her all along. The return to Africa is not merely about stepping onto the soil of the ancestors or reclaiming a passport to a nation. It is about reconnecting with the very essence of who we are. For centuries, the children of Africa were scattered across the earth, torn away from their motherland by the brutal winds of colonization and slavery. But even as chains bound their bodies, their spirit carried memories that could not be erased. Those memories whispered of pyramids and temples, of kingdoms and scholars, of rhythm and resilience. They whispered of a home not just made of earth and rivers, but of blood and purpose. The return, therefore, is more than a physical act. It is a spiritual awakening. It is the rekindling of a fire that was never truly extinguished. When people of African descent travel back to the continent, something profound happens inside them. The air feels familiar, even if they've never breathed it before. The land seems to call them by name, as if recognizing an old friend. This connection is not coincidental. It is ancestral. Within every descendant of Africa, there exists a spiritual frequency that aligns with the soil of the motherland. To return is to realign that frequency, to harmonize one's inner rhythm with the heartbeat of the continent. This spiritual reconnection transcends nationality, politics, and religion. It is about remembering the truth that was hidden, that you are not lost, you are simply waiting to be found again. For too long, the narrative of Africa has been written through the lens of outsiders who painted it as a place of poverty, darkness, and despair. But those who return begin to see what was deliberately hidden, the unbroken lineage of brilliance, creativity, and divine intelligence that still flows through the continent. They begin to understand that Africa is not behind. It is the beginning. Every civilization that has flourished on this planet has in some way drawn from her wisdom, from the sciences of Kemet to the philosophies of Timbuktu, from the art of Benin to the rhythm of the drum that birthed every genre of music known today. Africa's energy has always been global. When the diaspora begins to reconnect, it's not just an emotional journey, it's a reclamation of identity. The return teaches that being African is not a matter of geography, but of consciousness. It is about understanding that melanin is more than pigmentation. It's memory, it's history, it's the coding of the universe imprinted in human form. To rediscover that is to realize that the power once stolen was never truly lost. It lived within you, dormant, waiting to be remembered. This remembrance is the spiritual return that changes everything. It restores dignity, pride, and unity. It builds bridges between brothers and sisters who were told they were strangers. It heals the invisible wounds carried through generations. This spiritual return is not limited to physical travel. Some may never step foot on the continent, yet they feel Africa rising within them. They begin to research their lineage, study the traditions, wear their natural hair, learn the languages, and reconnect through art, culture, and music. This too is the return. Every act of remembrance becomes a step toward restoration. Every time someone embraces their African identity with pride instead of pain, a piece of the diaspora heals. It's as if each rediscovered truth stitches together the fabric that was torn by history. But this awakening also comes with responsibility. To return spiritually means to rise consciously. It means to embody the values that once made Africa the cradle of civilization, community, wisdom, balance, and respect for life. The world feared a united Africa because it understood that such unity would awaken an unstoppable force, a people who know who they are. When the diaspora unites with the continent, not through politics but through purpose, not through religion but through truth, the world begins to shift. That unity transcends borders and births a new kind of power, the power of collective consciousness. And yet this journey is deeply personal. It challenges each person to look within and confront the generational pain, the inherited shame, and the silent anger that came from centuries of displacement. The spiritual return is not comfortable. It is cleansing. It burns away illusions and demands authenticity. It asks the question, who were you before the world told you who to be? It calls for the shedding of false identities so that the true African soul can rise again, confident, compassionate, and unstoppable. This awakening is happening everywhere. You can see it in the rise of African art, in the global celebration of African fashion, in the growing movement to reclaim African spirituality, and in the way people proudly say, "I am African," no matter where they live. This is not a trend, it's a rebirth. The spirit of Africa is calling her children home, not just to her land, but to her truth. And as more people answer that call, a powerful transformation unfolds. A continent once divided begins to unite, a people once silenced begin to speak, and a history once buried begins to breathe again. To return spiritually is to finally stand in the fullness of one's identity without apology. It is to walk with the knowledge that you come from kings and queens, thinkers and builders, dreamers and warriors. It is to understand that the same energy that built pyramids flows in your veins. The same creativity that composed ancient songs beats in your heart. The same wisdom that guided ancestors through storms lives in your mind. This is what it means to come home, not to a place but to a power. The world may not understand this kind of return, but those who feel it know it's real. They know that no matter how far the journey takes them, the spirit of Africa moves within them. It whispers in their intuition, speaks through their resilience, and shines through their presence. This is why the return cannot be stopped. It is not organized by man, but by the divine order of time. Africa is awakening, and so are her children. Together they are remembering, rebuilding, and restoring the harmony that was once lost. The return is the bridge between what was broken and what is being reborn. It's the realization that Africa never left you, you simply had to find your way back to her rhythm. And now as her sons and daughters begin to awaken, a new chapter unfolds. One where Africa is not defined by the past, but by her eternal wisdom, strength, and spirit. The true return is not measured by miles traveled, but by hearts restored. And that, more than anything, is what makes coming home to Africa a spiritual revolution. The world can't silence what was destined to rise, because truth has a way of finding its voice, no matter how long it's been buried. The awakening of the African diaspora is not a coincidence. It is the fulfillment of a prophecy written in the rhythm of time. For centuries, Africa's children were scattered to the winds, separated by oceans and oppression, yet somehow that inner flame, the memory of who they were, never went out. It flickered through song, through rhythm, through resilience. It lived in the stories whispered by grandparents, in the prayers of mothers, and in the dreams of a generation that refused to be erased. The time has come when that flame is no longer hidden. The descendants of Africa are remembering who they are, and no power on earth can stop that remembrance from spreading like fire through the souls of a people rediscovering their greatness. You see, the reason the world fears a united, awakened Africa is not because of its poverty or weakness. It's because of its potential. For too long, the narrative of Africa has been written by hands that sought to diminish her light. They told stories of famine and war, of corruption and chaos, while hiding the truth that Africa is the foundation of civilization, the birthplace of science, language, and philosophy. The minerals that fuel the modern world, the rhythms that move its music, and the wisdom that shaped its spirit all came from this land. When her scattered sons and daughters begin to reconnect with that truth, something powerful happens. They begin to see through the illusion that they were broken. They begin to realize they were only divided to be rediscovered stronger. That realization is shaking the world at its core. The awakening of the diaspora isn't just cultural, it's spiritual. It's not about race alone, it's about consciousness. It's about recognizing that melanin is not just skin pigment, but an ancient intelligence, an inheritance of power, creativity, and adaptability that connects its carriers to the frequency of the universe itself. The same sun that nourishes the earth also fuels the melanin within, turning pain into purpose and struggle into strength. That's why, no matter how much oppression tried to suppress it, the black spirit could not be broken. Every attempt to erase it only made it evolve, adapt, and return stronger. The music changed form, the languages transformed, but the soul remained the same. It is that soul now rising once again that the world cannot silence. Across the globe, this rebirth is taking shape. You can see it in the arts, where African influence defines global trends. You can see it in the sciences, where descendants of Africa are leading innovation. You can feel it in the consciousness of people demanding to know their roots, their history, and their true identity. This is not nostalgia, it's a movement toward truth. The truth that we were never slaves but stolen kings and queens. We were never lost. We were displaced. We were never inferior. We were miseducated. And now as that veil lifts, as the diaspora begins to unite in understanding and pride, the world begins to shift. The systems built on Africa's silence tremble because they were built on lies, and when truth rises, no lie can survive. The return to self begins quietly, often in the heart. It begins when someone feels that longing for something they can't explain, a pull toward the unknown, a connection to ancestors they've never met. It begins when one starts asking, who am I really? That question is the spark. From there, knowledge becomes the flame. As people learn about Kemet, about Kush, about Mali, Songhai, and Benin, they begin to see the pattern that was hidden. They realize Africa was not a dark continent, it was a brilliant one, dimmed by distortion. And when the diaspora learns this truth, they don't just find pride, they find purpose. That purpose becomes power, and power, once awakened, cannot be contained. The world knows that's why division has been its strongest weapon. Color against color, tribe against tribe, nation against nation. But the new generation is seeing through it. They are learning that unity is not sameness, it's strength. A united Africa in spirit and consciousness would not just change Africa, it would change the world. Imagine the diaspora's creativity, the continent's resources, and the ancestral wisdom combined with modern innovation. That union would create a renaissance unlike any other in history. That's what the world fears. A people who know their value, who remember their legacy, and who walk with the quiet confidence of destiny. Every revolution begins with remembrance. The awakening of the African diaspora is not a political revolution, it is a spiritual one. It's happening in the hearts of people who choose healing over hate, knowledge over ignorance, pride over shame. It's the understanding that to rise doesn't mean to dominate, it means to restore balance. Africa's rise is not against the world, it's for, because when Africa heals, humanity heals. When Africa remembers, the world remembers where it came from. When Africa stands in her light, the world learns what true strength looks like, not through conquest, but through connection. The journey ahead won't be easy. There will be resistance, as there always is when truth challenges power. But history has shown that nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. The rebirth of African consciousness is that idea. It's the voice of a billion souls echoing through time saying, we are still here. Every time a young person learns their true history, a chain breaks. Every time a community unites to build rather than compete, the world shifts. Every time a black child looks in the mirror and sees royalty instead of rejection, the ancestors smile. This is how change begins. Not with armies, but with awareness. The world can't silence what was destined to rise because destiny isn't dictated by power. It's guided by purpose. Africa's purpose has always been to teach humanity balance, creativity, and spiritual depth. The diaspora's purpose is to carry that light into the corners of the earth that forgot its source. Together they form the circle that was once broken. The rise of Africa's children is not revenge, it's restoration. It's the rhythm of justice moving through time, reminding the world that light can be dimmed but never destroyed. And so the call is clear. Return not just to the land, but to the truth. Return to the understanding that you are the continuation of greatness, the evidence of survival, the embodiment of resilience. Return to the realization that your very existence is proof that Africa never died. She simply transformed. The awakening is not coming. It's already here. The world can feel it. The systems that once thrived on separation now tremble at the sound of unity. The chains that once bound generations are breaking under the weight of awareness. And through it all, the spirit of Africa rises, not in anger, but in power, in purpose, and in peace. No matter how hard the world tries, it cannot silence the song of a people whose melody was written by time itself. Africa's children are singing again, not the songs of sorrow but of sovereignty. They are remembering the language of the ancestors, walking with the confidence of destiny and reclaiming what was always theirs, identity, dignity, and destiny. The world can't silence what was destined to rise, because that rise is not a moment, it's a movement, a heartbeat, a rebirth that will echo through eternity.